Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for July 26th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating. And also here are Aaron McHale, Offer Schall, Ralph Kohler, and Randy Ost. Last week we were talking about this issue. It is number 3457914. Certain users understand the word draft to mean unpublished and are surprised that a node in draft is published if a previous version of the node is published. So I think Ralph has prepared a site with the current patch applied. Usual super secure login of admin and admin. And if we create, say, an article, and I think we have the content
Benji?
Moderation. Yes.
Just one note before you proceed. Could you scroll up, please? Because there's one detail I wanted to highlight here as well. I've noticed in the advanced column on the sidebar, you have basically the last saved and author on top, but technically it's hiding the current state because, for example, for last saved, it's not saved yet. So it's still shown and already shown basically, while the other, the moderation state, which will be shown afterwards, isn't shown there. Because after that, in our test, then we will have, for example, draft there without a label also. So
okay,
just an aspect.
Okay, and let's see, should I say this one as the initial draft is published, or the initial revision as published? So here I have simple test article. I now go to edit it, and depending on my permissions, I might not have permission to create a new published revision. Since I do have all permissions, I can choose, and I'm choosing to make it a draft. Up here at the top, we have, as Ralph points out, there's no label, but it says that it is published. Has a timestamp for the last save. The author is admin, which is me. So this will be in a draft unpublished revision, and that's the ambiguity we're trying to clear up. What does it mean to have a draft revision? I can save this. It'll create a second revision. So maybe I'll just go ahead and do that. If you have permission to see the revisions, you can now see that there are two revisions. One is the current or public revision. And the second is a draft, so they're listed most recent first. I have options to delete that revision or to set it as the current revision. And the issue is that on the edit page, those options, the status of the published draft, of the published revision and the draft revision, is not made clear to the editor. Ralph, is your hand still raised or again raised?
It's again raised.
Okay, go ahead.
Because there's another aspect. If you could go to the edit page again, please. Now with draft, it's again clear, but there's also, because before you had published, and there's another aspect, because if you could go now, maybe in another tab to the content page, please,
To
the content list overview. Yeah.
this one?
Yep. Because as you can see, I've added the moderation state, and there are two more issues that way. Because on the node edit form with published, it's also not clear if it's basically the status, which is published or not published, or if it's the moderation state. And that way, it's also ambiguous. And the other detail, which is confusing and I think goes into this issue as well and wasn't mentioned there. If you add that moderation state, as you can see, we have status published, a status published, and moderation state published. If you go now to the moderated content tab, the secondary.
Yes.
Yep. There you see moderation state draft. So it's on overview, it's published. On the moderated content, it's draft. So it's also inconsistent.
Right. I think behind the scenes, the difference between these two tabs is that moderated content is a view of node revisions, and it shows the most recent revision. And overview is a view of nodes rather than node revisions. I think that's at the heart of the difference between what it shows here.
But the fields added on the view, I've used also revisions for the overview page, the same as the moderated content.
Right, this will go to node/2/edit. And this link will also go to node/2/edit. Yeah. Okay, so let's, for purposes of scope, let's focus on the edit page. And the usual usability questions are, how can we describe the current state? And how can we describe what options the user has or what the future state will be? Now, with the patch applied, actually, I don't see the message from the, oh.
1 second, I have to change the, I think I'm on the wrong branch.
And actually, while we're working on that, does anyone have any questions about the problem we're trying to solve, the possible confusion here? As the issue title said, it's a question of confusion between the state, the moderation state, draft, and whether the node is published or not, and this idea that a node can be both published and have a draft revision.
You can reload now, Benji.
Okay. So the solution proposed in the issue is to add this line here. A previous revision of this node is published. See all revisions. And while that can be helpful, we got to the point last week where we agreed that instead of adding it here, we should be adding some more information up here, because this is the natural place to give the current status. We didn't get as far as deciding exactly what information should be added here. But as Ralph points out, this draft doesn't have any label, so adding a label might help. And also adding the information, not just about the latest revision, which is draft, but also the fact that there is a previous revision that is published. So somehow we should add that information there. And secondarily, perhaps we should add some information. We already have these two lines, current state is draft and change to draft. And perhaps there should be some clarification there as to what the effect is of those choices. Does that about sum up where we ended up at the end of last week's meeting? I think Ralph, Aaron,
Yes.
and Offer were all there. I'm getting a thumbs up from Ralph.
Yeah, I think that's about it. I know we talked about a lot of detail, and last week feels like about a year ago, and based on my current workload. So I'm trying to remember, but I think that kind of summarizes where we got to. Yeah. We did also actually talk about not having the link because we already have, when you're up at that point, you already are so close to the revisions tab. And I suppose I could think of other reasons not to have a link, but yeah.
That's right. So if we add some information up here, we're very close to the tabs or the local actions. So as Aaron says, we probably don't need the additional link. So let's focus on this area first. And how do we want to be more clear about the status of the revisions?
I think I would agree with what I think it was maybe Ralph said or you said, Benji, about having a label for draft, because draft on its own does seem sort of unclear as to, are you talking about like the current state of the content or the revision? So I think that's a good sort of line of thinking to be on.
Okay, let me use my browser tools to make some suggestions. Here's this div. This is just a div, which is kind of ugly, but anyway. Make this a label. Latest revision. And then we could have, say, label revision published. Let's see what that would look like. Okay, well, obviously, we'd want to change the HTML elements so that things are on the same line. But is this moving in the right direction?
I'll say one of the things that I liked the copywriting at the one on the bottom where it said very plainly, like there's a, I forget exactly what it said, but basically like there's a published version of this page. And that I felt like communicated it pretty clearly. And One thing I'm uncertain about is, you know, like how much we need to bring this to the attention of folks when this happens. Like, is this something that, like, if we just had like plain text status update, that's fine because we're communicating it well? Or is this something that a lot of people have a great deal of confusion about, and that we should maybe like throw some like alarms saying, hey, you know, this has the page is still live, you're just making revisions that haven't been pushed live yet?
Yeah, we considered the possibility of having a status message. And that might be the right thing to do. But on the other hand, it can also lead to sort of alarm fatigue because
Yeah.
that message will be there so often. And we're sort of leaning towards saying, well, this is just the current status. That information should be here. And yeah, the text at the bottom, so full sentence, that's good. A previous revision of this note is published. So we could just,
Yeah, I would want to lift that those two sentences. Like, I personally like the link that says see all revisions. That's an affordance for users who maybe like don't know that one of the tabs are revisions. I work with a lot of users of Drupal sites who, like, editing the Drupal site is something that they don't do very often. So every little affordance we can give them helps them. Now, this is all just my 2 cents. Like, I know that you've all been working on this already. I'm just asking some questions. I'm trying to be helpful.
sure.
Yeah, I think that's like, no, I think that's really like a really valuable insight, because one of the strengths of these meetings, as Benji will talk about, is that where we have a diverse set of viewpoints and perspectives, we get better results. So I think it's what you're saying is really important, and it's kind of similar to something I was saying last week, actually, where a CMS that we have, that a lot of our editors work with, it essentially makes it really clear like what's going to happen after you save the form. Because I think, and from what I've observed, that's what's important to people. It's like, if when I go here, I just want some certainty that either that I'm not going to be like changing the published version, or this is going to be a new draft. And I feel like the problem with the current form is, to a degree, like you're maybe not, like, we're not giving enough certainty in some ways. So I guess part of the way that we do that is we communicate, like, the name of using like the name of the tabs, and like using the submit buttons and things to communicate like what's going to happen. Like, is this going to be published? Is this going to be, saved as a draft, that kind of thing. So I was kind of leaning in a similar direction last week, saying like, maybe we should have some kind of and I think we kind of ran out of time to explore it in too much detail, but like I was talking about how we have how we've named on our CMS, how we've named the tabs and how we've named the buttons and things to make it really clear and give you that certainty. Like, if you're going here, you're going to be saving a draft, or you're going to be saving the published version or whatever. So,
Okay. I am, by the way, modifying the text a little bit to be consistent, that we have this link labeled revisions and this link is going to the same place. So I like to give it the same link text, although that's open for discussion. But go ahead, Ralph.
One detail, I'm still not very comfortable with the label for the moderation state with latest revision. If we would have gone with the pattern with the bold labels, like underneath with last saved author for the moderation state and the current revision published, then I would see some sort of pro argument for that. But still, I would label it what it is, and it's basically the moderation state in here. So I wouldn't call it necessarily latest revision, And on the other hand, I like the idea to simply move that line of a previous revision of this node is published or still published, or however it will be phrased, but yeah, as basically a sub text of that or a description for that moderation state might be doable. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let's try to make the formatting a little more consistent. I'll be a little lazy and just use sort of bold tags. And this will just be span. And then it's bold.
For what it's worth, I put some text into the chat. Just doing a little bit of copywriting. Like, I think you are editing :draft. A previous version, which would link to the previous version directly, of this node is published. See all revisions, with revisions being a link to the revisions tab. And then this draft was last saved date, and then like just author admin. And I feel like that helps, like, because one of the things that I see here with last saved and the date, especially with it being underneath text that says a previous revision, it's like, what was last saved, the previous revision or the draft I'm working on?
Okay. So is that accurate? And is that the terminology that we use elsewhere? You're editing revision, and I think the word revision should be in there somewhere. So Ralph suggests changing this revision was last saved. Although I mean, in a sense, you're not editing a revision, you're creating a new revision based on the previous revision, right?
Yeah, because the create revision checkbox is checked, and interestingly, you can't disable it. I wonder if that's because is that like a content moderation thing that you can't create multiple revisions, or? Or is it because revisions are required? I see the text below it. Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, we definitely shouldn't say node, because we're trying to move away from the word node in the interface.
And also the current merge request on the issue only applies to nodes, but we would probably want this for taxonomy terms and other content if that content is moderated. I don't know. I've never seen a site where anything other than nodes is controlled by content moderation. Have you?
Yeah, it's definitely possible, and funny you mention it because I've just been working on something for a site where it needs taxonomies to be moderated, and as of 10.3, that's going to be possible. That was committed in 10.3, so yeah, it's definitely possible. And you can even apply you can create workflows and apply them to users and other things. So especially given the amount of work that was put in to make the revision UI itself, like generic, so it can be, you'll see now blocks and taxonomies and things also have a revision UI. So it'd be great if we could try and keep consistency.
Okay, so offer has to leave. So let's go through Randy's suggestions sort of line by line. Who thinks that we should add something like "you are editing" to the first line up here? I get a thumbs up from Aaron. And presumably thumbs up from Randy. Ralph, any opinion?
No strong opinion, either
Okay.
or. So
The only thing I might do, and this is possibly a follow-up, is to be mindful that if that's true, as long as you also don't change the moderation state. So we might want something where, like, I don't know if it's possible for then that text to like change in real time if you also change the moderation state in the dropdown, because that would then, if you do that, you would then be like, editing. Well, would you still be? Does that text still apply? I closed the chat window. Because then it's like you will be like, it will no longer be what you're editing will become like published or in review or whatever the next stage is rather than draft.
Yeah, I guess it seems to me that that suggests that on the revision tab, if I'm editing a revision, then I'll still have the two revisions, and this one that I'm editing is going to change, and that's inaccurate. So I kind of don't like saying that you are editing a revision. Randy, did you want to add something?
No, that's fine. I'm just I just am throwing out suggestions. I think that I see how it gets a little bit more robust and complicated, and maybe we need to talk in terms of what the status of it is instead of what the user is doing.
Right. And Ralph points out there's another issue. This is 2899719. Revision version language on revision listing page is misleading with content moderation enabled. So that would affect this page, right, Ralph?
yes.
Okay.
But it's also connected to the node edit page and the terminology used there. So
let's see. So we don't have a consensus here. Let me, for the sake of discussion, let's put in Randy's suggestion. You wanted something like not bold. You are editing a Did you actually want all caps for draft?
No.
Okay. Just indicating that that's something that varies.
Yeah, we just we need to call it out, because I think the user should see the state of it, like should see draft published, whatever status it is.
There we go. Oops, left in column. Um, So let's go on to the next line. So I more or less copied what was in the current merge request, and Randy suggests making previous revision a link, saying a previous revision is published. And yeah, let's get rid of the phrase of this node.
Yeah, I posted a second version that said a previous revision is published. So,
Right, I think that's what I'm looking at now.
yeah.
A previous revision. Let's get rid of this node. Perhaps. So go ahead, Ralph.
Just one thought in regards of the of the first line again. I agree with Randy that communicating the current state, and that was also the reason why I suggested initially to go simply with the label moderation state and the label which is used on other pages. Because the thing I wonder about, the longer I look at it, is do we have anywhere else in the admin UI microcopy that directly addresses the user, like you are editing and do some sort of hand holding and explaining what is currently happening in some sort of conversational way?
Yeah, I can't think of any. So this would be inconsistent with most of the admin UI, which is sort of worth considering holistically, and perhaps this is not the right issue to make large scale changes like that. In other words, let's not make piecemeal changes. If they're worth making, let's change the tone of the admin interface all over the place and not just in one place at a time.
Definitely worth to consider, but yeah, if we are going that way, then do it holistically.
What about for on confirmation steps? Like, I think that's like if you delete something, that's probably an example of where we're more directly addressing the user, perhaps. I'm trying to remember what that, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what that messaging is.
Those, the delete messages. Do you want to delete node X, for example?
We don't. Yeah, I guess deleting a node gets a confirmation form.
Are you sure you want to delete? Yeah, exactly that.
So that is directly addressing the user.
But there is also the point where we've already agreed on, I think, a few months back or weeks back, to move that question to the body instead of keeping it in the title and addressing there the question and raising the question there.
That's right. Also, let me look at another confirmation form. So I'm pretty sure that if we delete a field, and again, Zoom is getting in the way. Right. And here again, we're sort of addressing the user. And then the main body is sort of passive voice. This action cannot be undone. And then information about exactly what changes will be made. Okay, so these confirmation forms do have some precedence for directly addressing the user.
Yeah, I think we tend to prefer the active voice.
Yes.
The thing I'm thinking about as well is, does this wording work for when the moderation state isn't just draft? Like, I'm not sure. Is the intention that this text would be there for like, it would say draft on anything that isn't published, or are we talking about just, because the current content is in draft? Like if the content was in review, would this read correctly? Also keeping in mind that like the revision stages are entirely arbitrary, and the site can define its own content moderation stages however it wants.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think we have here just the default states of draft and published. And where would that be under structure? No, it's not under structure. Is it? It's configuration workflow.
While you're looking for that, I posted a screenshot. I went in and edited the bar as it is before we started going in and the sidebar before we went in and started editing it. And I just added the previous revision as published, see all revisions underneath the word draft, which was the status. And maybe this is sufficient. It keeps it kind of simple, and we don't have to, like, I personally like dialogue that talks to the user, that kind of makes more of a connection. But I also know that a lot of the node stuff is more like straightforward statusy, except for when we're trying to engage the user in an action. So maybe this is good.
Okay. So yeah, I was going to say, first of all, where was I? As Aaron was saying, the moderation states, we can add new ones, and I think we can also declare which ones correspond to being published, right?
I think you can only set the draft one. I think published is coded in as the published state, or probably for technical reasons.
Yeah, and any moderation state. Oh, why can't I edit this? But we have these two checkboxes. When I create,
I think because draft, yeah, because draft is, maybe if you edit like archived, you can change it, because I think draft is because it's the initial state, maybe.
Okay.
Well, you can set it as published. Okay. What about that?
So there's a lot of freedom in how the moderation works. That let's see. One thing you can't do is delete the published state. I see. Well, I guess draft and published cannot be deleted, but any new state that I add, I have the option of making it published. When content reaches this state, it should be published. So there's sort of a relation between the moderation state and the core status field in the database, which is published or unpublished. So looking at this screenshot, or I think that's what I currently have, close to what I currently have over here, 2 links here. My original suggestion was not to have any links here because we already have the revisions link. I don't like giving the user too many links because a link is an option and that leads to decision fatigue. And I don't know how often someone is going to want to go to the link for the previous revision from this page. I think just the link to the revisions page is more useful. So I'd sort of like to compromise on having single link here. So let's try Ralph's suggestion that we label this as moderation state, right, Ralph?
Yes.
So that has the virtue of consistency. I'm going to make this no longer a link.
And it's also more flexible in regards whatever moderation state you have, it will work.
Oops. Somehow I have it in my head that strong is an HTML tag. That bold is an HTML tag, when of course it's just B.
It feels like it should be a thing, right? Because if there's B, why not just do bold and have them do the same thing?
Which of course you can do with web components. But anyway, so
I think is it because the user going to understand what moderation state means? Because to me, that doesn't feel any more clear than when it just said draft. Like I don't really, even I don't feel like I understand. Because I think it's still the same. I think it's still the same, like part of the same problem of like, how do I know that when I hit save, I'm not going to edit the I'm not going to like result in something being published, or maybe that's not the problem, but it feels like part of it is the problem, I guess.
So briefly, my idea is that the text up here should describe current state, and what will happen next is something that we can add down here. And Ralph, do you have something to add?
Yeah, just to Aaron's point in regards of moderation state, because down there where Bungie is currently scrolled to, you're already using state. And if moderation state up there in the advanced column confuses you, then state at the bottom won't ring a bell as well. So, and
Yeah,
that way,
like
go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, because down there it doesn't say moderation state though. So like we'd be introducing a new, like a word here that isn't used. It just says current state. But if it's already down there, I mean, it's already down there. Like, so now I'm wondering, like, because it's already down there, are we like adding an unnecessary amount of information by also putting it in the sidebar?
Well, we are duplicating information, but that's not always a bad thing. And I think current state information belongs here.
Input.
Go ahead.
In particular, if you land on the page and just want to get a top level overview about the current situation for that node, that way you have the title as well as the top of the advanced column with moderation state, current revision published, yes, no, last saved and author. And that way you know most of the details necessary to get a top level overview.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that this current formatting is fairly easy to scan, right? We have these bold labels, and we don't need to do too much formatting to indicate that these two sentences are related to the moderation state. So I think that's fairly easy to scan. And I guess we don't have consensus, but I still believe that having the revisions tab up here means we don't really need to duplicate it here, which would, at least at this screen width, let this fit on a single line.
I think the other thing we have to keep in mind from an accessibility perspective is that we need to make sure that links can stand on their own. So the example I'd quite often use, if you're a screen reader user and you're tabbing through all of the links on the page, will that link make sense out of context? So that's a really important thing when it comes to any links, which is why we generally always have descriptive link text. So yeah, we just always have to bear that in mind as well, that any link text has to stand on its own.
So that's part of why I chose to make just the single word revisions the link, because we already have a link that goes to the same place with the same text. So that should not add to the confusion if we use the same text for the same link elsewhere on the page. So I'm not sure, are we approaching a consensus, or do we still have differing opinions here?
I'm
I-
feeling good.
I have another thing that's in my head about about like current revision published, yes. Well, I don't know if I should have a question mark, but I also, again, I'm like, the word current is used to mean, like, if you go down to the bottom of the page, it says like, what does it say? The current
So current revision is the term used here on the revisions page. And you want to go look at the bottom of the
yeah.
page?
Is that, where does it say? Yeah, so it says okay, so that says, did I use the word current there? See, that's a bit slightly could be confusing because yeah, here we're using the word current to mean the version you're working with, which is the latest version. But on the revisions tab, we use the word current to mean like what is the published version.
Yes, let's be more consistent. Call it moderation state.
Well,
And I think Aaron is right that question mark was a bad choice. Again, current revision is the term used on the revisions tab, and that's why I chose it here.
I guess like in this context, does current revision mean, are we intending that to mean like the version like that what you're working on right now? So like you're on this edit form and I'm working on changes. Does that mean like if I see current revision published, does that mean when I hit save that what I'm saving is going to be published? Like, does that mean that because in your head, if you come to this and it's in draft, you're probably thinking about the current version. You could be thinking about it to mean what's published, or you could be thinking about it to mean what the latest revision is in draft. And I feel like that word could mean different things to different people.
So Ralph also asks in the chat, what should be the copy for the case of no previous revision? And the suggestion on the issue is this node has no published revision. And then again, have link see all revisions.
And the second comment was in regards of Aaron's point, to clarify, it's basically the current revision published basically means is there a published previous version of that node? That is basically what the information is that should be communicated.
So instead of using current revision, which is the term we get from the revisions list, should we call this earlier revision? Other revision? Some revision?
Do we even need that line? Because like above, we're basically saying there is a published version.
Yeah.
So do we even need this line?
Just strike it.
That's true. I suggested this before we added this. So if we like the complete sentence, if we think that's clear, then yes, let's strike it.
Yeah. I think it is because like moderation states can get quite, they can get quite complicated. So I think the clearer we can make things.
And just one thought, for the copy for the other scenario I've posted, with simply adjusting the copy from a previous revision is published to no previous revision is published. In that case.
Yeah, we certainly wouldn't want to talk about nodes. No previous revision is published. Sure.
And maybe, is it there necessary at all to see all revisions in that case? Because there we are basically on the latest revision and therefore there's no need, isn't it?
Okay, and Randy just had to drop. And we are getting very close to the end of the hour. So again, my position is that we never need this because we have the revisions tab right here.
Oh, and Aaron posted a direct message to me. Aaron, I guess you wanted to post it globally.
I didn't intend that to be a direct message. I find Zooms, that's weird.
But it just is a relevant one and a good one. So
yeah, it's
because my worry was about my suggestion with no previous revision is published that is too close to the other and could be mixed up. And with Aaron's suggestion, there are no published revisions. Something like that in that regard might be visually different.
Yeah. It is also keeping with a more active voice, I guess, if we just went with there are no published revisions.
Oh.
Do we need the word? I'm going to regret suggesting this, but Do we need to say like for instance, how do I explain? So do we something like there are no published revisions of this content, or a previous revision of this content is published. I don't know if I like that or not. I'm just trying to think of like ways that it's adding clarification, but that might not make sense if we're talking about taxonomy. A previous revision of this term is published. Maybe actually there are no published terms, or maybe that could work. I don't know.
I think it's a case of less is more.
Yeah,
I mean, this whole area is about this piece of content, this node or this taxonomy term.
true. Yeah, that's true.
I just wonder, is that case necessary at all? There are no published revisions, and shouldn't we just show that a previous revision is published just in that case, if that applies, and otherwise just leave it out? Because there are no published revisions could raise confusion.
Yeah.
And simply go with moderation state, published, for example, last saved author, and in that case of that issue, moderation state draft, then a previous revision is published, and that's it.
Yeah, I think I'd agree actually, because I was trying to there was something didn't quite sit right with me about what I'd suggested, and I couldn't figure out what it was until you said it, Ralph. But yeah, I think if you're drafting the content before it's published, there's a good chance you probably know that like it's in draft. I feel like we're telling the user something they probably already know.
Yeah, I agree too. I don't think we need a message in that case. The only confusing case is when there is a previous published revision and we're working on a draft. So that's the only time we should add the message. Okay, we've made some progress. We still need to figure out how to change what changes to make at the bottom of the page to help clarify that. But I think this is probably there's room for improvement, but I think this is an improvement over the current state. So I'll consider that progress.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify quickly, what did it say? What did it say before? I think we changed it to moderation state, but what was did it say
Just
current
draft.
state?
No,
Let
just
me
draft.
duplicate the tab.
Oh, not up there, but back down at the bottom where, yeah, it says current state down there. Okay. I guess it's a question of, do we want to just use current state because that's what's already on the page, or do we, because then if we change it up there, then we change it down there, and yeah, I don't know. But it's already 4 minutes past, and I want to open another conversation.
Right. Okay. Thanks for coming. And
shall I comment on the issue because to this point, is there consensus now, or should we revisit it another time?
Yeah, I think there's consensus that this is an improvement over the current state and an improvement over the current merge request. But it's sort of not necessarily final.
Okay, but at least people on the issue could work on moving the information to the advanced column.
Yes.
And changing a few labels, and we could still then revisit it and find out maybe a description for the widget at the bottom to clarify it further there, maybe.
Right.
Okay. Then I'll comment on it later tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
Then have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Ralph. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.